All right, all right. Well, I was working on this tube design, and I thought it would be a great candidate to try that new scarf seam settings that's supposed to get rid of the seams, or at least reduce the seams. Now, you probably know what the scarf seam is if you've been watching a lot of YouTube videos. It is it's some settings that are added in. It's actually in Orca Slicer. It's a beta release right now at the time of this video, and it's supposed to reduce or get rid of these seams. And you can see if you can see the seam, how pronounced it is, especially if you get it in the right light. And I'll just rotate it around so you can see it there, even on these black pieces. And that's on the inner seam also with this. Yep, there it is. Can you see that? If you get the light right on it. So it's really pronounced, and you can get this on even on some flat surfaces, and it's where the layer transitions as it keeps going up and up to the next layer. And I've tried other settings to try to reduce it or trying to deal with it. And one of the main ones I used to try, the seam position right here, where it says, aligned, which is, what we just looked at. There's random, which, so it'll start the next layer at just random spots instead of just being all on one, alignment. And I haven't had too good luck with that. When I'm looking at the random, it just scatters them all over the place. And while it doesn't have that pronounced seam, it just looks like there's random artifacts just splashed around on the part, and I think it does more harm than good, you know what I mean? And the nearest, we can try to align it, and I've done that a lot too. Say if it's on an inner surface somewhere and you try to hide it where there's a seam or a corner, you can do it that way. But overall, I always end up with a big seam like that. And in another instance, I was getting blobs coming out of where the seams are supposed to be. One here and one up here on this inner part of this ring. Now this was kind of special because this is you can see it, how soft this is. It's a real soft filament, almost like a TPU. And where the seam was, it was just leaving blobs, right? So I treated it like a Bowden tube, and because I was printing these off on the Bamboo Lab P1S. All the P1 and the X1 series, they're more of a direct drive. And I just treated it like a Bowden tube and looked at the settings. For the filament here, the settings where it's on system overrides, when you take a look at the retraction length, well, you enable it, and instead of 0.8, I went up to 3, like that. And that seemed to work. You can see these are two identical pieces. Now, if I rub my finger across it, I can feel the seam, but you can't see it. You can't see that big blob that was leaving there. So this was a really, really soft filament, and I had to do a filament retraction to get rid of those blobs. But I'm sure if this was a taller wall, you'd still see the seam, right? So I definitely wanted to try that scarf seam and see if that would do the job. So I was watching some YouTube videos, and that's when I saw this one from Teaching Tech, and he was pointing everybody over to this printables page, the Scarf Seams Guide, and it's a pretty good video. You might want to watch it too. He went through much more details, different scenarios, using these test files. But You can take a look at this, and it gives a good description. Gives a lot of info here, all the updates while they were developing the scarf seam. You know, there's the overview, different requirements. I mean, it's a pretty good, it's a pretty nice guide, right? And I used this to set the settings on Orca Slicer. Mainly these here. You can see optimal speeds. Let's see, a slower outer wall speed. 50 to 100, and he suggests 75 to 100 millimeters per second, and I think I used 75. The wider outer wall, that was quite a change, up to 0.6. It seems huge, but I tried at 0.6, and I also tried 0.5, and I was getting the same results. The higher layer height, it says might be helpful, but I just kept it at 0.2. The inner, outer, inner, and that's the setting for the wall order, you know, where it's going to print, and yeah, and the extrusion rate smoothing, they set it to 300 millimeters per second squared, and yeah, I just followed all this, and then further down, yeah, it just keeps on going. The number of inner walls, the print order, classic mode, the speed. Here we go. Conditional scarf joint. Using the contour plus the hole, I use that so that because on this tube design, you know, the contour on the outside, but you also have that inner surface, and it would leave a seam on that also. And using the inner scarf. And it seems almost redundant, but I did try it. And I scarfed around the entire wall since, you know, this was a tube. So I just wanted to make sure that everything was covered. The scarf length, just left it the default of 20 millimeters. The scarf steps, same thing, 20. Well, the default 10, I believe I set it on the default here. Yeah, just everything, just follow this. At least it gives a good benchmark on the settings, and then you can play with them and tweak them as you please. So here, this is my tube design that I was working on, and I did not download the test sample, you know, from printables, because I was just going to test the tube, right? I just want to test that one seam. So all these settings that we're looking at, I'm not dealing with any overhangs or anything like that, right? This is simply just for this wall on a tube. So we'll go over here and take a look. You can see the major changes that I did. The outer wall at 75. I didn't change anything else. Strength there, you know, the walls, it all stayed the same there. And I usually use 3. I'd probably go up to 4. But this is kind of a thin-walled tube anyway, so let's move on. The quality, so the outer wall width, you can see it's 0.6. It was quite a change. It's going from what, 0.41 or 0.42? Yep, 0.41 up to 0.6. But I think I had tried 0.6, and I also tried 0.5. And didn't see any appreciable difference, but you might get different results, right? So everything's aligned. The seam gap, that's pretty much standard. The scarf joint, we want the contour and hole. Conditional scarf joint. I left these angles, scarf speed the same, the scarf joint speed, because I had already slowed the outer wall down to 75, so that's going to be you know, basically 75, right? So I didn't change that at all. The height at 0, the start height. Scarf around the entire wall. Since it's a tube, I want to make sure it's all covered. The scarf length, I just left that as for 20 millimeters. Scarf stress at 10. Scarf joint for inner walls. And it seems almost redundant, right, that you're going to do this contour and the hole, because that's actually, you know, just an inner wall, right? But you might use it, say, if you have some clearance holes or something, you know, through the part, and you know you want to cover that too. But this one, just to make sure, it's going to cover that whole inner wall. Roll base wipe speed, that's on. Let's see what else. I think that was it. Oh, here we go. The wall printing order, you want to set it to inner, outer, inner. And that is how I set mine up. Pretty much just going by what they showed in on the printables example. So let's slice it and see how it looks. And you can see where the seam would actually first show up, if, you know, without all these changes. Now this is kind of strange. Now I hadn't seen this before, but you can see for some reason on this little part of the tube, this band right here, it's putting the seam on the other side. And same down here on just spots. Why it did that, I don't know. You know, I had never seen that before, but that's how I printed it. So, well, let's take a look. Yeah, so remember, this is out of this gray PLA, just standard PLA, and there's the seam. Same thing with, I believe this was PLA carbon fiber, and this was just a matte black PLA. But you can see the seams on all of them, and especially even on the inside there. If you can, lighting's probably not optimum for that, but you can see them there for sure. And here is the print. So let's take a close look at it. Now I'm just slowly rotating it so you can see the entire tube. You can see it did a pretty darn good job of hiding the seam. If you look hard enough, like right there, can you see that? If you get it in the right light, you can see the joint, but I can't feel it. You know, when I'm rubbing my finger over it, I don't feel the seam, but you can see when you're really looking hard, it's there. Same thing on the inside. I can see it in the right light, but I cannot feel it. Yeah, I thought it turned out fantastic. And when I printed it off, I also used an STL file, or I used a step file instead of the STL. I always get some better results, especially on a round surface. And with this tube, and combine it with the scarf seam, and man, that's one of the best ones I've printed off. You know, I thought it was fantastic. So kudos to the guys who developed that. Right? I'm looking forward for more. And given that this is a beta release, I'm sure there's going to be more developments, more testing before it's actually released, which I'm really looking forward to. And I'm going to play around with it some more, and with overhangs or just whatever I'm printing, and see if we can do away with seams under different conditions, different models. I'm really looking forward to it. It's one of the best little add-ons in the Orca Slicer settings that I've seen in a long time. So we will probably see it in the full release, and also we'll probably end up seeing it in the Bamboo Lab studio also. I'm sure it's going to show up there pretty soon. Well, I guess that is it for this video. I thought it was a fantastic idea. Like I said, kudos to the guys who developed this, and I'm looking for further developments on it. I like it already, so I'm glad I decided to test with the beta release. And well, that's it for this video, and as always, thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and watch for my next video.